You may be seated. I'd like to invite the children forward now for a time with the children.
Hi, Auden. Why don't you come on up here? We're going to do a children's message for our church family together, you and me, okay? All right. Auden and I and some of the other children that will be joining us later on will be learning about a man named Abram that God called, and he said, I just want you to leave your home and trust me. Auden, what is this word? What, can you say that in the microphone?
Trust.
Yep, this word is trust. And you can see it because I've written it, right? But can you see trust if you don't read it? Can you see trust? Trust is something that we just have to have. What's this word?
Faith.
Yeah, this word is faith. Faith is believing in things that we can't see. And trust is something that we have, that we just believe in, that we can't see either. So, Auden, would you help me demonstrate trust today? Okay. All right. I want you to turn this way. Turn your body this way. Turn around. Face the piano. There you go. Okay. And when I say go, I want you to fall back into my arms and trust that I'm going to catch you. Do you trust me? Oh, she trusts me because we've spent a lot of time together, okay? Now, had this been the first time that she met me, she might not trust me, okay? Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
I love going out and walking in the dark. It's one of my favorite times to be out in the woods, out for a hike. The last few nights, the moon has been just sparklingly bright in the dark of night. When I was a camp counselor a lot of years ago, I used to take my kids out once a week for a night hike. Now, they all wanted to take their flashlights, but the rule was no flashlights. So they just got to experience the wonder of being out in the world at night. It's amazing when your eyes get used to the dark how much you can actually see. But I know that night is not for everyone. Night is also the cover for things that happen in secret. Night is the time when mischief takes place because it's easier to sneak around undetected in the middle of the night. So is that why Nicodemus went to Jesus at night? Because he needed the meeting to go undetected? For that matter, what was the darkness or the void in Nicodemus's heart that led him to seek Jesus under the cover of night? Nicodemus, we know, was an aristocrat, a privileged man, a man with status and power. And yet he came to Jesus, deferring to Jesus, looking for something. This man who seemingly had everything was still missing that thing which gave him life, real life. In the Greek language, there are two words for life. One refers to the biological processes that make up our physical existence, and the other refers to the character of life, the fullness of life, life as God intended. Nicodemus was living, but clearly he wasn't living. He came to Jesus, the light of the world, under the cover of night, under darkness, looking for life. He had come to the right place, but would he go home with life. In the opening chapter of this gospel, John establishes darkness as a metaphor for those who are without the life of God. He writes that Jesus was the light shining in the darkness. The darkness cannot overcome that light of God that has come into the world. Over and over again in the first chapter, John wants to make the point that Jesus is the light of God's love and presence that has come into a dark world. The light of Jesus is the life of all people, John writes. It has struck me in this story how Nicodemus and Jesus spend this whole conversation kind of talking past each other. At the beginning, Nicodemus hasn't even asked Jesus a question yet, and Jesus launches into this cryptic talk about water and the Spirit and being born from above. Now, if there's one thing that's clear in this exchange between Jesus and Nicodemus, it's that Jesus does not give Nicodemus the easy answers that he might have been looking for. And if Nicodemus was looking for easy answers, he was certainly demonstrating the spirit of many 21st century religious seekers. I think a lot of people have a sense of religious entitlement that includes spiritual benefit with no effort. Give me some religion, but don't ask for any commitment. Don't make me feel uncomfortable or call into question my long-held beliefs or assumptions, and certainly, above all, never ask me to change. Nicodemus was in search of something. He had come under the cover of night at great risk to himself and his reputation. And I have this hunch that Nicodemus was hoping Jesus would tell him that everything was going to be okay, just go home and stuff will take care of itself. And if that's what he was looking for, he went away sorely disappointed. Because in the course of the conversation, Jesus indicated that if Nicodemus wanted the life that he was looking for, it wasn't going to happen by just tweaking things here and there. It wasn't going to be like making a few adjustments and everything will be okay. Being born from above is not about becoming a better person. It's about becoming a new person. Are you up for that? Is it even possible? It's about as possible as Nicodemus' question about a grown man going back into his mother's womb a second time and being born. Fast forward to the end of the gospel reading. More cryptic words about an ancient story where people looked to a bronze serpent on a stick and were saved from death. Remember that story? Well, here's a refresher. The Israelites were wandering in the wilderness, as they had been for decades now, and they need to make another little detour to escape the aggression of the Canaanites. And on the way, during this detour, they complain yet again, the same old refrain that they've been repeating since they left Egypt. Why did you bring us out here into the wilderness to die, Moses? There is no bread there, there's no water, and we loathe this wretched bread that God is giving us. And so in response to their complaints, God sent poisonous snakes into the camp, and many were bitten and died. And then, of course, the people got the message. We have offended, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he take the serpents away from us. So Moses prayed that prayer, and the Lord answered that prayer. But the antidote was comical, almost absurd. At the Lord's command, Moses fashioned this serpent out of bronze, and he put it up on a stick and had somebody carry it through the camp. And the ones who fixed their gaze on that bronze serpent on a stick were saved. Kind of crazy, huh? As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. Of course, Jesus was projecting forward to the end and the climax of his ministry when he would be lifted up on that cruel instrument of torture and execution, the Roman cross. If the serpent in the wilderness was absurd, the cross is even more so. We lose the scandal of the cross because we have become so familiar with it. But I urge you this morning to see anew what God is doing here. For people just like Nicodemus and you and me and all of us, so in need, not just of tweaks and adjustments, but of new life. The dreaded and cruel instrument of torture becomes the means to that new life. To both Nicodemus and us, the invitation is to open our imaginations and see and receive the new life that God absurdly offers us through Jesus' death and resurrection. He invites us to come into the light of day, to be given new life yet again this day as we hear the word and come to the table of grace. He invites us again to be changed and transformed and to be open to the changes and transformations that God offers us. Maybe the change and transformation this day is for you to grow in your faith, to grow to a measure of maturity in your faith, to full participation in the abundant life that God offers us in Jesus. All the while remembering that it's God who gives the gift, God the one who gives us new birth in water and the Spirit. Rebirth is God's gift to give, God's work to accomplish, and God is the one who labors to bring us this new life. You know, the reality is God works hard for us and for our salvation to bring us the gift of faith. God conceives us as Christians. God nourishes us in the womb of faith. God gives us life. And at some point, like any pregnant woman who is close to full term, God gets impatient with gestation and wants to push the baby through the birth canal into greater maturity, into fullness of life, into a faith lived wholly in the world. And that's what Jesus is getting at in this story. A few weeks ago, Lillian called to tell me that her husband Charles had died at 101 years old. Charles was a good man, a decorated World War II veteran. He spent 50 years working in his own body shop in Maywood, Illinois. He was a dedicated husband and father. But almost all the way through that long life, there was something in Charles that was resistant to faith. I never learned exactly what that was. For years, decades, Charles stayed away from church. Lillian, on the other hand, was an every Sunday churchgoer. And about 15 years ago, Charles began to come with her occasionally, then a little more often. And it wasn't long before he was with her every Sunday. And at 92 years old, Charles came to me and said, "I want to become a member of the church." Now, I can't say I saw much different in his outer behavior because Charles was a good man. But inside, a transformation had happened, a sense of peace, and he was willing to tell anyone about it. Something was different, he said. Maybe a slice of life as God intended it to be. Unless a person be born of water and the Spirit. What's the transformation that God has in store for you?